Hey guys, how are you? So I wasn't sure I was going to actually do another one of these video things, but something happened today, this morning, and it's been sort of drilling a hole in my brain ever since then, and I needed to talk about it. So I think that everyone would have to be living under a rock right now to not know what's happening in Baltimore, specifically what happened last night with the rioting. And about the media coverage around it, and all of the other similar events before this one, for very much the same reasons. And so this morning, obviously, it was a huge topic of conversation on the morning radio shows, and I was driving to work, listening to a satellite radio talk show, and a woman called in. They had a caller call in from a suburb right outside of Atlanta. She and her husband are what she would consider upper middle class. He is an over-the-road truck driver. She's a nurse. They make good money. They have a nice home. They live in a city that they love, and they are very proud parents of 3 boys. I think she said 16, 13, and 11. They also happen to be African American. And she was talking about the fact that since her boys were very young, that her husband has spent a good deal of time teaching them what to do, not when, or not if, but when, they have to interact with the police. And she said, as a woman, well, she's seen it, she's never experienced it for herself, and so she has never questioned her husband's decision to make this a priority conversation with their kids. And has simply trusted that it was something that needed to happen. But she said it is in comparison to her Caucasian friends, an inordinate amount of time gets dedicated to this topic of conversation. And she went on to say, I have good boys. My boys are good students, and they're athletes, and they're good boys. And that was the last thing she said right before you heard her voice crack. And she said, they're good boys and I love them. But I wish I wasn't the mother of Black children in today's world. And she talked about the fact that she holds her breath a little bit every day until all 3 of her boys and her husband are home safely for the night. And she said that with her oldest in particular, she's constantly looking at her phone every day, just waiting for a phone call. And, you know, he's out with his friends and he's playing sports and they're going to McDonald's after the game and they're hanging out and they're in cars. And she worries all the time. And she said, the one and only hope that I have for my kids is that they will grow up. That they'll live to see adulthood. As you can see, it struck a chord with me. I'm not a parent. But I just, I kept thinking, God, how incredibly sick our society is. When this woman who, she doesn't live in an inner city with a high crime rate. She lives in suburbia, for God's sakes. She's a nurse. That all she can think about as far as her children's future is God, I hope they make it out alive. I can't imagine being a parent and knowing that there was a chance that I could lose my child to death. Not in a metaphorical way, but a very literal, my child could die because they have the nerve to be brown in a white world. And that's really what it comes down to. That's what she's worried about. That's what it comes down to for her. That's what she spends her days checking the phone for. And she talked about how her husband used to work a lot of overnight shifts, and he would drive home at 3 or 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning, and that he used to get pulled over more times during his commute every week than days that he didn't, and how he would call her and leave her on speakerphone so that there was a witness if something happened to him when this happened. And obviously, it has struck a chord with me in a really deep place. And part of it may be because I've lived it. I've been the passenger in that car when a police officer pulled us over for the crime of the driver having the gall to drive while black, God forbid, after dark. And I've been the wife waiting at home when when my husband got pulled over like every day on his commute because we lived in an affluent community on a golf course in a nice house. And what was he doing in that neighborhood at 4 o'clock in the afternoon? God forbid. And, I think I used to dismiss it as being something that only happened in the South. But that's not true. That's not true. That's just where we lived. And it happens everywhere. So I'm curious because I imagine that there are some people who are going to watch this and they're going to think, that's ridiculous. It's being blown out of proportion. It's not really how it works. That's not how life goes. You're wrong. You're absolutely wrong. And then, I wonder about my friends who are raising boys. And do you have conversations with them? Do you have conversations with girls about what to do if they are ever faced with interacting with police? Because I got to tell you, I think that if I had kids, I don't think that would be something I would think about. I don't. It's not a conversation that my mother ever had with me. And my stepfather was a cop. But it wasn't necessary. Or if you just want to tell me that I'm not the only one that this makes cry, I'm not a very teary person, but this is a pretty jagged pill to swallow, that this is the country and the world that I live in. And it breaks my heart that this mom is right now probably sitting at her kitchen table looking at her phone and hoping that her little boys make it home safe tonight. And I don't think it should have to be like that for her or any other mom. So sorry for the overly emotional response, but I'd like to hear what you have to say. So thanks.